everyone, it's Lori, and I am here today with my October reading wrap up. I have read 8 books in the month of October, and as usual, they're kind of all over the place. So I'm going to go ahead and start with kind of my sci-fi fantasy books. But if you are interested in a particular type of book and don't want to watch the whole wrap up, I will have timestamps below. I'll end up with nonfiction at the end. I also have classic, middle grade, that's what that's called, and a women's contemporary type novel. So we'll get started with my sci-fi and fantasy. I just finished up The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. I'm not really sure how you pronounce that. And this was one that I listened to on Audible. I'm in the midst of crocheting a baby blanket for a shower. And I have spent more than 10 hours on it now because I think this is about a 10-hour book. And I crocheted my way through the whole thing. This was a fabulous book. I gave this one 5 stars. I'm very much looking forward to the second book in the series. The series is called Lady Astronaut. And it looks like maybe it's just the 2 books, but I haven't really looked into it that closely. And it was read by the author. I thought that the audiobook was exceptionally well done. And I don't usually like female narrators. I kind of have an anti-female narrator agenda. But she was just fabulous at it. So the basic premise of the book is that a disaster strikes and now humanity has to get off Earth. And so the protagonist, and it's written in first person, so you're hearing her story, is a woman who is a brilliant mathematician and physicist, and she wants to be an astronaut, and she's working in the space program. It is set in the 1950s, so there's lots of interesting things about gender, race relations, religion. The main character and her husband are Jewish, and there's also quite a bit about anxiety and mental illness and the stigma attached to being treated for anything like that. And just all sorts of fascinating mathematical stuff that I didn't understand because I am not a math person. But I really appreciated how well done this book appeared to be. It was just so much fun to listen to. My one criticism of it, now I gave the book 5 stars because I thought it was fabulous, is that the main character is married, and she and her husband have a sex life, and I got to hear a little bit more about it than I wanted to. It got a little uncomfortable. It might not have been so bad had I been reading a physical copy, because then I could have just skimmed it, but it got a little detailed there. So, and being not the type of person who likes to read that, and I didn't feel like it moved the storyline along at all, I could have done without that. So, but I do very much recommend The Calculated Stars, particularly the Audible version of it. The fantasy book I finished was book 5 of the Wheel of Time series, The Fires of Heaven. I started this in a physical copy that I had to return to the library quite a while ago. Fortunately, the library also had a digital copy, so this time I didn't have to finish up with an audiobook. I could finish up with a Kindle edition, but it took a while. That's a long book. Lots of great stuff happens in this book. I was a little disappointed that my favorite character, Perrin, was not in this book at all. And there's kind of some tragedy that happens towards the end. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens next. But I am going to take a short break from the Wheel of Time series. And I'm going to read the prequel, New Spring, in between books 5 and book 6. One reason is that the YouTuber Daniel Green, who does a whole lot of Wheel of Time content, suggests reading it after book 5. But the other thing is it's much, much shorter. I checked it out from the library last month thinking I'd have started it by now. I haven't. But it just is less intimidating. And with next month being nonfiction November, I'm going to be spending a lot more time on nonfiction. So I didn't want another 1,000-ish page book to work through. So I also gave Fires of Heaven 5 stars. I've just been super impressed with the series so far. But, I would have liked to have seen some of Perrin, but there were some really fascinating things that happened in book 5. So I was okay with that. I apparently am doing all the books I don't have with me all in a row. Next, I'd like to talk about The Bookish Life of Nina Hill by Abby Waxman. This, I believe Heather at Bookables did a review on, and she had said that it was very character driven, which I like, and that if you liked Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine, that this might be something you would enjoy. And overall, I did enjoy the book, but I came really close to DNFing it, not that far into it. Again, going back to the Calculating Stars with all the bedroom scenes, at least there, it was married bedroom scenes, which bothers me less, but there was just so much crude talking in this book. So she and her friends would just get together and just talk in manners that I would never talk with a friend about intimate topics. And it was almost too much for me. And it's kind of a shame it's there, because I'm sure people have DNF'd this book over it. And it didn't further the plot at all, the gossiping with friends. It was just, apparently that's what millennials are like, or at least in books, that's what millennials are like. I don't know if they really are, because, I'm old. But I really enjoyed kind of the plot line of this girl not knowing who her father is, being raised just by her mother, and then circumstances happen where she finds out who her father is, and she kind of meets some family. And then there's, of course, a romantic plot line as well. And I kind of enjoyed the romantic plot line too. And there's also lots of books. She works in a bookstore. She competes in trivia. She's just basically a nerd. So I enjoyed reading about a nerd's life. I relate to that. But I just really didn't appreciate all the crudeness, and I could have done without it. So it probably would have been a 4-star book for me had it not been for all of that crudeness. The classic I've read this month, technically I haven't finished. It's October 30th, and I have 70 pages left, so I will be finishing this tonight or tomorrow. But that is The Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. This is one that my girls are reading for British literature. So you can see all these tape flags here are the required reading for the girls. I am reading the whole thing because I've never read the whole Canterbury Tales. But now that I've read, 3/4 of it all the way through, I understand why you always get assigned selections from the Canterbury Tales, because this is just, it's interesting. It's giving me a take on life at the time of Chaucer, like the 1300s or whatever. I remember in high school reading selections and having to memorize the prologue in Middle English, which I still know quite a bit of, and my husband knows quite a bit of Sir Gawain the Green Knight in Middle English because of high school. Our English teachers were apparently slightly evil. But there's just so much crude humor in here. Just crude, rude, lewd, all the humors like that. So there's one particular story, I can't remember which one, where I think maybe it's a friar. This guy farts on a friar, and he's supposed to share it with all the other friars. So they come up with a method for him sharing the fart with all the other friars that involves a wheel with 12 spokes. I don't know. So I don't know that this is one you really have to read in its entirety. I think the selections that you read in high school were probably the best parts of it. I won't say I didn't laugh at the crude humor, but it's just a lot of crude humor for a classic work. So do you need to run out and read the Canterbury Tales? Probably not, but it's interesting now that I have read it. I have a bit of more perspective on what this book is, and it's kind of a silly book, really, overall. General theme of this book is that there's a bunch of, in case you don't know, in case you were not tortured by your high school English teachers the way I was, there is a group of pilgrims on a pilgrimage, and they're going along with this host, and the host basically says whoever tells the best tale will get like a free dinner at the end or something silly like that. So there's this whole list of pilgrims that have quite vivid descriptions. I think Charlotte, for her project, was going to do some sort of art piece of all of the pilgrims in the Canterbury Tales. And they're all telling stories. Some of them are very epic, and some of them involve lots of farting. So, yeah. Don't know that you really need to read this one. I haven't rated it yet because I've got a little bit left, but I have a feeling it's probably going to be about 3 stars for me. The middle grade book I read was Over the Moon by Natalie Lloyd. Natalie Lloyd wrote A Snicker of Magic, which I read sometime in this past year. Blue is not a good color for my camera. And I really enjoyed A Snicker of Magic. I may have enjoyed Over the Moon even more. So there is a young girl in here who lives in the mountains, and she cleans for the people in the valley because that's what most of the mountain girls do. Well, the mountain boys go into the mines. They can't see the stars. The stars have been blocked out, are all blocked out. You can't see the stars anymore. They think the animals have disappeared. Everybody's afraid of the forest. So somebody decides to try to use these animals to collect gold dust. So she ends up pretending to be a boy to try to become a rider of one of these horses so that she can help collect the gold dust in an attempt to save her brother from kind of a bad fate that he's going to face if her family can't make a whole bunch of money. And in the end, she kind of finds out that it's a wider conspiracy than she thought. Anyway, Natalie Lloyd just has the most lyrical way of writing, and I really enjoy her writing style. And she always writes such fun and compelling characters, particularly girl characters. I feel like, not that her boys are bad, but she just captures something about the essence of, maybe 10 to 12-year-old girls, perhaps. Maybe a little bit older, but she's got a lovely way of writing, and I gave this book 5 stars. And then finally, we're to my nonfiction selections of the month, and I did read 3 this month. I'm going to start with the 2 religious and end with the one more secular. The first one was The End of the Modern World by Romano Guardini. This was one of the books for year 2 of the Read Your Way to Heaven reading list plan, which that is a book to Read Your Way to Heaven. I have a problem. But this is a philosophy and theology book. I did not love it. I am not much of a philosopher. I like more practical things. I'm probably better off for having read it, but honestly, he got to practical considerations on the last 2 pages, and I kind of wish at least half the book had been more practical suggestions and less theoretical or philosophical. This is probably one my husband will very much like, so I'll probably recommend it to him. But then again, he minored in philosophy in college, and I took my 1 philosophy class, and then I was done. So I gave this 3 stars. It's pretty good, but just I didn't connect with it because I'm not big into philosophy. I also read The Thrill of the Chaste, Finding Fulfillment While Keeping Your Clothes On by Dawn Eden. And this is one that I chose for my Catholic 2019 challenge, which I kind of fell off the wagon over the summer, and we'll see if I finish it before the end of the year or if I drag it into 2020 as well. This is a really interesting kind of memoir. So Dawn Eden grew up in kind of a broken home. Her parents were divorced. She watched her mom go through all these different relationships trying to find someone to treat her well. And so that relationship, the broken relationship with her dad and her broken relationship with her mom to some extent because of the separation of her parents, kind of really affected her. She kind of went the way of modern society where you just like hook up randomly with people and that gives you power. And then she eventually converted to Christianity, and then she realized this is not good. So it was kind of a slow process of getting out of that, because her whole life had kind of revolved around that. She was very a journalist having to do with rock and roll. So she was in kind of a scene that was pretty sexually open. So she kind of reverted back to trying to figure out what chastity was and what that would look like in her life. I really did enjoy this. I gave it 4 stars. The only little nitpicky thing I really didn't like about this is she falls into this whole, like, God has one special person out there for you, so I'm just waiting for that one special person to show up. And I don't think that theologically that is necessarily true. I love my husband, but, like, I don't know that there's this deep-seated only one true love sort of thing, so that never really goes that well with me. But anyway, it was interesting. Definitely a different perspective than I have, being, a 40-year-old who's been married 20 years versus a, I'm not sure how old she was when she wrote this, but definitely at least in her 30s, 30-year-old single woman trying to live a chaste life. That's obviously going to look different. So, interesting. I would recommend it if you're interested in memoirs. I thought it was a good one. And the last one I want to talk about is one that I might do a full review on. So, if I do it and post it before, I'll link it up top. And if I post it after, I guess, be on the lookout for this, or maybe I won't post it at all. It's really hard to tell. And that was Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. I read this because I saw Olive at a book Olive do a review on it, and then I saw it at the library, and I was like, this looks like fun. So basically, this too is kind of almost memoir-y. I don't know. It's so hard to kind of come up with categories sometimes. So Lori Gottlieb is a therapist, and she had kind of this traumatic breakup, and so she ended up getting a therapist. So it talks about her therapy with her therapist, and it also talks about her work as a therapist working with other people. And it's just really fascinating because you get to see both sides, and you get to see that maybe therapists are not very good patients for other therapists. I mean, she's such a nightmare for her therapist for such a long time in the book. But she figures out that what she thought the problem wasn't at all the problem. But it takes her a long time to get there. So I really enjoyed hearing the stories of her patients, hearing the stories of her in therapy, kind of her being honest about what she did and did not tell her therapist at different times. So I really liked this book, and I gave it 5 stars because it was just so much fun to read. Yeah. So if you're interested in memoir, if you're interested in a book about a therapist that goes to a therapist, yeah, I would recommend this one. I don't know if there are many others out there, but I really enjoyed how this one went. So those were all of the books I read in October. Please let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, or if you have suggestions for me based on the books that I'm reading this month, because I could always use more book suggestions. Feel free to subscribe if you're interested in seeing more videos. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.